Partway through Ben's Oroonoko is given another name. Once he is enslaved, he is renamed Caesar, just as Imawinda is renamed Clement. A few things about this. First of all, this is absolutely in keeping with standard slave-holding practice. They always rename their slaves. That Caesar is given the name of a mighty Roman emperor is both a comment on this particular slave. We are told repeatedly how princely Oroonoko seems, and so he is given a kind of imperial name, a name for a war leader and a ruler. But the sad truth is, white slaveholders gave ethnically African slaves these kind of grandiose names all the time. They're given a lot of names from classical history, which shows that knowing the classics doesn't necessarily make you a better person, and lots of names that bespeak power and authority for people who have been deprived of any power and authority. So you give a powerless person a name that paradoxically belongs to a monarch, an authority figure, an emperor, a god. One standard name for slaves in North America was Jupiter, after the Roman king of the gods. Jefferson had a slave named Jupiter. He showed up at the Continental Congress with his slave, Jupiter. One of the other founding fathers, George Mason, who was at the Constitutional Convention in 1787, brought with him his slave, Liberty. He had named his slave Liberty. So giving the slave a name that bespeaks power is often a way of emphasizing to them in a cruel irony how powerless they are. On one hand, we call Oroonoko Caesar because he is like Caesar and the kind of person who might lead a revolt, but also to underscore how much power he doesn't have, how much he's lost. It's a cruel irony. Clement is given a name out of French Romance, meaning she's a fit heroine for romance, but also it makes painfully clear how far her status is from those heroines. She doesn't have the right to choose. So renaming slaves is a kind of act of discursive violence. It emphasizes control. And Oroonoko's real name is taken from him. But I want to point out that Oroonoko's real name isn't very plausible as a real name either. Ben herself has given her character an invented name as his real African name. Caesar is clearly not this man's name, but his name really couldn't be Oroonoko, which is a phonetic spelling of the Oroonoko River in South America, not far from where our character is taken in the colony of Suriname. Right. So you have an African prince who gets kidnapped and enslaved and just happens to be taken to the other side of the planet and put down in a colony right by a river that happens to have his name. Sure, that could happen. Meanwhile, Oroonoko's cousin, Prince Mississippi, is kidnapped and taken to New Orleans. It's ridiculous. It's patently ridiculous, or it's only realistic if you don't care about the plausibility of the African experience. If, like some of Ben's original audience, you're willing to believe anything about what happens in sub-Saharan Africa. So Ben both dramatizes for us the kind of violence done to Caesar by taking away his real name and giving him a cruelly ironic name, frankly. But she's done just the same herself. The narrative itself takes away the prince's identity and instead writes over it a fantasy that the Europeans have about him. We call him Oroonoko because we met him near the Oroonoko. Just as the name Caesar, it is about what the white people are thinking about, not about the experience of the slave, but about what the Europeans are thinking, the fantasies they inscribe upon the people they've stolen.